It's great being nearer 70 than 60 because you can forgive yourself lots of mistakes. I forgot to pack my red dress, and this morning I sat on my glasses. So my glasses are like this. Keeping learners motivated in the classroom and perhaps at home. A subject which is very close to my heart. And it's how can we be teachers if we haven't got motivated students? When I was a young child, I enjoyed being at school, but what I really, really, really wanted to be was a dancer. But my legs were too short. But I still remember my first, second, third, fourth, fifth ballet positions. I also wanted to be an architect. But at the end of the 1960s, when I was studying at architecture school, it was very difficult for a young woman to be an architect. And I found myself demotivated. It was a man's world. And I also wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be lots of things. So I couldn't be an architect, so I decided to be a graphic artist. And I packed a suitcase. I had an uncle who was a jazz drummer in Geneva, and I found myself jobs in the international organizations, the World Health Organization and the European Centre for Nuclear Research. And that's when I really, really, really became very interested in language, because I was working with people who didn't have English as a first language. And they were saying, well, what's the difference between much and many? What's the difference between fewer and less? And I'd never really thought about it. So when I came back to the UK in at the beginning of the 1980s, I decided to join your field and become a teacher. So back to university, and I taught for about 10 years. And then I became a writer because I wanted to create my own materials. And I'm now a published author as well. So that's me. Learners, my heart is really with young learners. I absolutely love writing for that primary age group. But today I'm going to be talking about students who are perhaps between 6 and about 14. So this is what I want to cover. Rethink some basics. Why do we learn language? Think about what makes a student more motivated in the language learning classroom. And to do a little bit of psychology as well, Jungian psychology. We're going to look at 4 teacher-parenting roles. This will impact on your motivation as a teacher. And also, just spend a few minutes thinking about how you might encourage parents to help their students, their sons and daughters at home. And as conscientious educators, something that's really close to my heart, I want to celebrate difference. I am different from all of you. You are all different from the person sitting next to you. And I think very often in our classrooms we forget that each of our students is unique. Each of our students is going to be motivated differently and uniquely according to their own world view. I'm very interested in psychology, and sometimes I try to explain this by saying we have a kind of library behind our heads. It's a sort of Harry Potter library. All the books move all the time, and these books contain every single conversation and experience that you have had, you personally have had, and they're cross-referencing all the time to try to make sense of what you believe in. And even today, this talk and the other talks you've heard, they have sort of created little exercise books to put in your library, and they are cross-referencing again, something new, a new thought. And this unique library is the lens through which we view the world. Your library. I have 2 sons. If we go for a walk, I live in the forest, if we go for a walk through the forest, their experiences will be very different. And your students' experiences will be very different in every single class that you take. So we're going to do a little bit of psychology, a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of sociolinguistics. What's it for? My 2 sons. Their first words are always mum and dad, aren't they? In any language, mama, papa. It's the first sounds that they make. My oldest son, who is 1.98 meters tall, William, his third word was more. He never stopped eating. He still eats a huge amount. He's not 1.98 wide, he's only 1.98 tall. My other son wanted to be a Formula One driver, racing car driver. His third word was car, car. At 10 months, we started hearing him saying, car, car, pointing at them. Even now, he dreams, he's 36 now, he still dreams of being a Formula One. I think it's probably the girls and the champagne are in those dreams as well. So saying who we are, expressing our personality and individuality, another speaker could take this subject and deliver it very differently. I'm bringing my personality to it and my individuality to it, my choice of words. Reading and learning about our world. We need language for that, although the news is pretty bad at the moment. I almost said Brexit. Listening and responding. You are, I hope, listening to what I say. If you were asking me questions, I would be responding. So we use language to develop the confidence as we grow, to say what we believe in, what our hopes, fears, desires are, what drives us, and what our own histories are. I always think it's very interesting. I love sociolinguistics. It's something that I studied at university. I love the fact that somebody will start saying, oh, my mother this, or my father this, or my brother this, and then we did this, and then we did this. And in your head, as you're listening, you are thinking of a parallel story to add, aren't you? Oh yeah, something like that happened to me too. I remember. We share histories. And we communicate these thoughts to the communities we find ourselves in, here today, here in Madrid, or across the world, or within our families. We create communities. No man is an island. And if we don't use language, we can't actually really be present in that community. How would it be for you for a week not to share language with anyone? Pretty hard, I think. You'd feel isolated, yes? Alone. How does it feel for a student in your class to say nothing, nada, niento, ničevo, rien, nothing? If your student, if one student sits at the back, puts their head down, says nothing, they are not part of your classroom community. And that is a bad feeling. They might not want to speak for all sorts of different reasons. We know that. But if you can just pull one word from that child and say, thank you, even if it's just yes or no, or I don't know, but to bring them into the classroom community, it's important, I think. Why did you want to learn a second language? What made it difficult? What made it fun? And was it the same for your classmates? Probably not. I was at school in the early 1960s, and that time, that was the James Bond era. America and Russia. And the British government decided that lots of children, not lots, but quite a lot, of children should learn to speak Russian. So I did 6 years of Russian at school. What made it difficult? All the endings. What made it fun? To write it. Just think for a second. What made it difficult for you to learn English if it was your second language? What made it fun? And take that consciousness again to your students. What is making it difficult for them? What is making it fun? And just for a minute, we'll explore this a little bit further, although I saw something like this in the previous speaker's talk. You are on a beach. What is your experience? You are on a beach. You're not in this room, you are on a beach. Is someone brave enough to shout out what their experience is? Anybody? Again? Margaritas! Okay, I'm not sure how I can classify that one. I'm trying to think of a science word for my stomach. Who saw something? A blue sky, a wave, sand. If you see colors, of course, you are probably a visual learner, primarily. You need to see things written down. If you hear something like a seagull, you are probably an aural learner, primarily. If you feel the sand between your toes, you're probably a kinesthetic learner. And you know about visual learning and aural learning and kinesthetic learning. Again, think that each child in your class will have a slightly different combination of how they like to learn. And to accommodate those 3 different approaches in your teaching. So what might be motivating for older students? I'm talking about sort of little ones who are perhaps 6, older ones who are 14, 15 here. Let's just think about those sort of extrinsic motivations for older students. They've got one foot in the adult world. They're beginning to think about their futures. I think you can read that for yourself. Little ones would probably have a different kind of motivation happening inside them. They want to have fun. They want to feel cleverer. That's really important for little children. I'm cleverer than you. My brother's taller than your brother. This is when they start measuring each other against each other. Sadly, that can be very demotivating. As soon as somebody realizes that they are not as clever as someone else, they start closing down a little bit. Children arrive at school when they're 5 or 6 years old, full of creativity, well, most children, if we're lucky, full of creativity and fun, and they want to be creative. By the time they are 11 or 12, that creativity is often diminishing because they have learnt that they're not as good at art or they're not as good at singing as somebody else. I'm sure you know this story, but I'll repeat it very quickly. Do you know the story about the little girl who's sitting at the back of the class and she's drawing, and the teacher says, "What are you drawing?" And the child says, "I'm drawing God." And the teacher says, "But we don't know what God looks like." And the little girl says, "You will in a minute." It's a nice story, I think. Doing something difficult, being able to talk to a friend in a language that their parents might not know. My grandparents lived most of their lives in Africa, in the Sudan and in Egypt, and they spoke very beautiful Arabic. And when we were little children, when my grandfather retired and came back to Britain, I spent quite a lot of time with them between the ages of sort of 6 and 10. And they used to speak in Arabic when they didn't want myself and my sister to understand what they were saying. I was fascinated by the language. It was the greatest puzzle, the code. Little children are blueprinted, hardwired to learn language. They want to learn language. They'll have other things that they want to do, of course. Their heroes, their hobbies online, gaming, etc. Okay, so one thing is for sure, though. To trigger intrinsic motivation, the teaching materials and the learning experience that we want to provide for them must be meaningful, whether they're 14 or 7. They must have a sense that there is a reason for doing this. Even if it's just to have fun. When they're 14, 15, it might be because I want to pass CET, because I want to pass PET. But there should be something meaningful and also something that relates to their world, of course. Fun, because we want to trigger that happiness chemical. If they're having fun, language is processed in a very, very different way. Language is not maths. Language is not a list of words that they have to learn. That we want them to use language for the reasons that we've already talked about. It's got to be meaningful, communicative, creative, saying who we are, saying what we want to do. Varied, that's hugely important. If you teach young children, you know that we're looking at changing activities every 5 or 10 minutes. Older children obviously have longer attention spans. Engaging, and should also allow for personal selection and expression. How can I say this? Language empowers you, doesn't it? If you have a second language, it empowers you. If you have a first language, it empowers you. It allows you to be part of that community, to be a voice in that community, to be communicative, to have that communication tool. If students have the possibility to make choices about the work that they want to do, and if they have an opportunity to say something which is unique to them, yes, I like that, yes, I don't like this, well, I think that's a good idea, I think this is a good idea, then you are empowering them, and that's hugely motivating for a child. You might know of the system used in some of the Scandinavian countries where groups of children work together. They might just have a project, these sort of CLIL projects, where they might decide to look at telephones, and they might study the language, the sort of language that people might use in a telephone call. They might look at the cost of telephone calls. They might look at the invention of the telephone and work together collaboratively in a group. And research has shown that a huge amount of language is produced in that sort of personal selection and personal expression situation. It's interesting. So we know that it should be appropriate to students' needs. Their worldview, my voice went then. Their skill set, challenging but not out of reach, and ideally should stimulate emotions. Because that's when the brain chemistry happens, when the left and the right brain start whizzing about, and language is processed in a much deeper way than if you are just learning a list of vocabulary items. And it should provoke thoughts, be creative, empowering, collaborative, and communicative. Yeah, that's no problem, is it? Easy. Or is it? No, it's not always that easy. You might not have the time. You certainly don't have the time to think about each child in your class being a unique person. You might not have the resources to cover all their individual hobbies and ideas. You might not have the technology. You might not have the possibility to work at the different levels that you have in class. That's another talk, I'm afraid. We can't go into that today. And also, there's the question of teacher talking time versus student talking time. Because if you give the empowerment to the students, suddenly you're not in charge, and that can be very scary. But let's just have a bit of fun for the moment. I love working with pictures. I've got to watch my clock because, yeah, we're okay. I love working with pictures. So here we have any picture halfway through, any exercise that you're doing in class, any visual whatsoever. And we can start asking some questions about it. According to the age, I'm just going to think here of sort of 9-year-olds or A2 learners or 9, 10-year-olds. So what's this guy? Have I got a pointer on this? I'm not sure if I have. What's this chap with the phone here? What's he saying? In groups, write the dialogue. Why is he making that telephone call? What's in the basket? What is the duck saying to the helicopter? What's the helicopter saying back to the duck? Why not? Why not? Children will think, what? But they'll like it. They'll have fun with it. Anybody got an idea what the duck is saying to the helicopter? Shout it out. Be brave. I wish I had a man running around with a microphone, like they do in political conferences. Come on, somebody, give me an idea. You can't park there. Thank you very much. What's the helicopter saying back? Tough. It's an emergency. He's run out of orange juice. I'm bringing the orange juice for the picnic. This boy in the tree, what's in his rucksack? Give children 10 seconds. You know, what's in his rucksack? Why is he in that tree? How did he get up there? Use the interrogatives. What's he thinking about? What was left of that tree in the picture? What was right of that farm in the picture? What happened just before? What's going to happen next? These are all creative, communicative activities, which, if you just want 3 or 4 minutes out of a lesson to get the brains whizzing again, you'll find that this sort of exercise works very well. Okay, here's one for you. Here's a picture. You can see what it is. Someone's got a green face. I said, I don't know if I've got a pointer on this. No, I haven't. The boy here in the red hoodie has got a green face. There's a computer. It looks like a really old one. There's someone with a broken arm. There's a plant. There's a woman's book. And there's a crying child. To the person sitting next to you, tell that person something that the picture doesn't tell us about one of those things. Why is that boy's face green? What is special about that plant? Be as crazy as you want. Children, learners love being crazy. Talk. What book is she reading? Why is that child crying? Creativity, collaboration, critical thinking. You've only got a minute because we're running late. I've put the woman in the blue sweater is reading a love scene in her favorite book. Actually, the person, at another conference, someone said she's reading 50 Shades of Grey. But I can't put that on the slide. Pointer's not working. I have a frozen... Oh, no, there it is. I've got 4 ladies who are brave enough to come up on stage. Would you come up on stage? We're going to do a little bit of psychology now. Motivation as teachers. This is my own personal model. Thank you so much. We're going to have to clap them afterwards because it's scary being up here, I can tell you. Thank you. Can you, one by one, I'll just say when I want you to, wait. They're very enthusiastic, they're very motivated. 4 parent-teacher roles for you to consider. I think pretty much all of us as teachers are good at directing. Would you say that? We tell our children, our learners, our young students what to do. Can you hold the arrow up for me? Good at directing. We give our students information. Could you hold the information up? We're very familiar with those 2 roles, aren't we? But I would suggest that that's more about instruction than education. Would you agree? Does that make sense? There's a big difference between instruction and education. Educo, as you know, means to bring out. I'm more interested in education. Instruction, put it in. Education, bring it out. Find what is good, what is special about each of your students, and bring it out. Give them an opportunity to make that talent grow. So, for that, we need 2 more roles. We need a heart. I care about you. Not because if you pass the exam, my director of studies is going to give me a pay rise. Not that sort of caring. The sort of caring that is shown when you know that child's voice. And if that child is not progressing, you worry about it. And that child knows that you know his or her name. By that I mean metaphorically. You notice when they are not there, they want to please you because you are important to them. And a lion. We need to energize, to encourage, to make our students feel braver. Let them make mistakes. Let them feel that they are capable of doing something that perhaps they are worrying about. Now, here, all 4 roles, bear with me, I think, I know, I feel, I do, are the 4 essential qualities that we have as human beings. This is Jungian psychology. And in every single situation, you find these 4 roles coming up again and again. They are the path to well-being. They are the path to autonomy. If you can bring all 4 roles to your teaching, you will motivate your children, you will see them grow. But that is hugely difficult. Just think for 1 minute, The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy knew the way. I always forget these. It's, again, great getting old because you forget, but then you forget that you've forgotten. The lion had no courage. The Tin Man had no, and the straw man had no. These are essential archetypal characteristics which come up again and again and again and again in stories. And for that reason, we can perhaps be a little bit more conscious of those in our teaching. I can talk about this for 3 hours. We've got no time. Thank you very much, ladies. No, just sit down. I'll collect them in a minute. Just sit down. Learners need help with the learning experience from both teachers and parents. And why? Perhaps for reasons that I've just spoken about. We can do the informing, we can do the direction, but perhaps we do not have time to give that one-to-one help, to know the children well enough, to know whether they are primarily kinesthetic learners, to know what turns a child on, what their specific interests are. My older son, all he could think of when he was 9, 10, 11 was cross-channel ferries. the boats that go between France and England. And we'd sit on the beach and he'd say, there's the da-di-da. It's 1,269 meters long. Did you know that, Mum? But they'll want to read about their special interests, and that will motivate them hugely. Some parents may be very willing, others may not. Some may think that English is incredibly important, others may not. And parents are going to vary hugely in the extent to which they can help children at home. But if you want to get parents on board, I think explaining that model will really, really help, because they will see that, you know, a teacher has perhaps 20 students, the parents only got one child, so they can focus on what that particular child wants to do. They can choose materials, you know, cross-channel ferries, that will definitely engage their own child. Time allowance, more flexible. No defined ruling regarding approach. So if they love to draw or if they like to sing, they can, I'm sure that in your younger classes you do a lot of singing, which will motivate a certain child, the musical child. I'm not at all musical, but my son is incredibly musical, as is my mother. They don't understand that I can't be. I can't remember a song. And of course, the parent knows the child intimately. I'm just going to look at the time again because we were running a little bit late. More varied rewards are possible. You're not allowed to do that in school. In England, we're not even allowed to touch our students. Is that the same here? Yeah. Primary school even. Not supposed to, you know, pat them on the back or hold their hand if they're feeling sad. We can't do that. There's something very wrong about that, I think. There's help online as well for parents, of course, and you can ask George on the Cambridge assessment stand outside if you want more help about where you will find wonderful resources online for yourself or for parents. They can, of course, familiarize their youngsters with all kinds of tasks, look at sample papers. I have worked, I don't know if George said, I've worked on the Young Learners paper a huge amount, but all the way up to IELTS and also the business exams. You can find so many resources on the Cambridge assessment site. And parents can too, it's easy. You can find the word lists. Some parents feel very confident about using, you know, working with word lists. I'm getting a nod from the lady in the fourth row there. You know, you can tick them off. I know that word, I know that word, I know that word, I know that word. And also perhaps even think about having an evening with other teachers or with parents to consider other things that might be very motivating in the classroom. I love the fact that mistakes bring opportunities for learning. When I was teaching my first adult class, Business English, I'm borderline dyslexic. That's not good for a writer. When I type, it doesn't seem to happen, but when I write on the board, sometimes I still make mistakes. The students used to say, Karen, there's an E on the end of before. I said, no, there isn't. Yes, there is. And I would say, oh, wonderful, I've made a mistake, but please, you make mistakes too, because if you don't make mistakes, I haven't got a job as a teacher. But also, I think it's important to remind yourselves that we all make mistakes. If I watch a recording of this talk tomorrow, I know that I will have made mistakes. And of course, English children, you know, when I listen to English children, my own kids as well, as they were growing up, I still don't have grandchildren. The last talk I went to, I said, send me pictures of your daughters. They'll get free books. They're both waiting for supermodels to sit in their laps, I think. And I've completely forgotten now what I was going to say, which is another great thing about being 70. I know. They regularize verb endings. I goed to school. I wented to school. I losted my robot. I have again, one of my son's great mistakes when we were growing up. Do you know what a utility room is? It's where the washing machine is. Utility. You can hear the word utile, utile. It must be something like that in Spanish because it's utile in French. And he always called it this is a bit risque, he called it the titily room. If you don't know why that's funny, go away and look it up. He called it the titily room, and my husband and I liked the mistake so much that we never corrected him. Young students have an extraordinary ability to learn language through listening or reading stories. Learning through storytelling is something I'm absolutely passionate about for so many reasons, and I'm looking at my time. I could talk to you about 4 hours about that. There are videos of me talking about story making and storytelling online, because I spoke at IATEFL this year about story making and storytelling. Do look it up if you're interested. You'll find it easy if you just Google Karen Saxby. Many students remember language more easily if it's combined with creative activities. We've talked about that. And I want to do one more thing to just show how we are all different in this room. Emphasize to teachers or parents the fact that their child's personality and combinations of interests, that magic Harry Potter library, is unique. Now I'm going to ask you to all close your eyes. Sorry. You don't have to if you don't want to. Nothing terrible is going to happen, but please close your eyes. Bear with me. Trust me. Trust me. I sound like the snake in the Jungle Book. Trust me. Oh, I didn't want to go to that slide. Your eyes are closed. In your mind's eye, I would like you to, I'm going to ask questions. Don't answer them. Just answer them in your imaginations. I'm going to ask you to see a lake. It's nighttime. Is there a moon in the sky or not? Across the other side of the lake, there's a mountain. Can you see the top? There's a cave in the mountain on the other side of that lake. What does it look like from the outside? Is it scary, friendly, interesting, dark, light? There's a boat on the lake. What kind of boat is it? There's a person in the boat. What sort of person is it? What are they doing? Open your eyes. Is that your picture? No, of course it's not. Maybe in the break you could tell somebody else what your picture looked like and how yours was different. Your library, your unique reference, your unique vision of the world, your individual personality. Your students are individuals with individual needs. I'm just going to let you read that. If you go in on a Monday morning and it's week 6, lesson 3, and you've got to do was doing, were doing, and you go in like this, was doing, were doing, you know very well that the children will pick up on that vibe. And here we have the Jungian thing. To be motivated, your students, 6-year-olds or 15-year-olds or 40-year-olds, need to understand what's happening and think, I can do this. And don't ask the question, have you understood? Because they'll say yes, won't they? Get somebody else to stand up and say what it is that you want them to do. feel they've been heard and adding something of their own, that voice in the classroom. Know they are being taught useful language to talk about their own interests and their own world. Doing different activities, being brave, taking risks, getting the homework done. That was the lion. Thinking, feeling, knowing, doing. All four for that rounded motivation. No problem, as I said. Towards well-being and maturity. Another thing that you might like to think about, I'm just closing now, is if you, what your particular share of those four energies are. Are you a thinking person, a doing person, a feeling person, or thinking, knowing person? It's a very interesting thing. I'm also a therapist. I don't advertise that very often, but I am also a therapist, and it's something that I do with my clients. The idea being to try to beef up the areas of your personality that you might want to, that might help to bring that sort of rounded approach to life. And again, I could talk for 5 hours about that. No time. Good luck. Thank you. I have actually put together 5 pages of activities. George, are those copied out or on the? I'm sorry, I really can't hear that. You can, great. That's another thing about getting old, you can't hear anymore. Selective hearing is very useful. Okay, thank you everybody. I wish I had 3 hours. Normally I talk for much longer. Thank you. Just going to get this.